Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&A, so let's get this started. I'm going to follow the usual format. I'm going to do 10 regular questions, and I'm going to have one kind of off-topic, personal opinion, personal type question. So you guys can cut out after the 10th question if you're not interested in hearing that, so let's get this started. First question, how did the knights, gladiators, and warriors from the Middle Age actually look like back then when they were trained since early childhood and were wearing heavy armor and swords all the time, but didn't have PEDs available since they didn't exist? I assume they didn't look like you see them in today's movies, but they probably weren't do you even lifters either. Alright, I'm not going to be able to answer all these because the gladiators is not the same thing. That goes further back before the Middle Ages. So let's just stick with knights. Let's keep this simple. Alright, knights all during the Middle Ages were actually very well fed. You've got to remember, being noble usually meant you had access to a lot more food and calories, and oftentimes you were fatter. You looked more like a typical American does today. You had access to lots and lots of food, whereas in peasants tended to be very, very lean and underweight due to, again, not always having access to the most food, depending on what they did for a living. Now, knights were generally hand-selected. When you think of a knight, that's not something that people always went and earned, that some peasant went and fought in a war and got knighted. That was very, very, very rare. Knights were generally, again, sometimes a title passed down as a hereditary title, or it was awarded to, again, very skilled warriors. But people who were soldiers and warriors during this time period tended to be raised into that from birth, and they spent their whole life training. So it wasn't just moving around in armor and things. They actually did chin-ups, and pull-ups were actually known. When you go back and look through medieval records, they did pull-ups and stuff in their armor. Well, if you do tons of weighted chin-ups, you're going to have a pretty big upper body. If you walk around wearing 50 pounds of armor all the time and training with swords and being extremely physically active, training day in, day out, you have access to good food all the time, you're going to be pretty jacked. Most of them probably looked a lot like athletes today. They were a bit taller than other people because, again, you were generally selected for the traits you had, being slightly more muscular, taller, bigger frame. Those were the traits that they generally wanted to see in families that knights came from. So truthfully, they probably looked a lot like today's athletes that you think of, just regular athletes who are in contact sports, whether it's rugby players, football players, people like that who do a combination of a lot of conditioning work with resistance training, who have access to lots of food. That's what they're going to look like, who are slightly genetically above average in regards to a lot of physical traits. So that's exactly what you would expect to see there. So in a lot of ways, it might be what you see in a lot of movies. Gladiators is a whole other topic. Gladiators were actually very fat, the Roman gladiators, and there was a reason for that, but that's a whole other topic maybe for another video. All right, next question. If you drink milk and you get gas and diarrhea, are your body still getting the calories out of it? If you drink a little milk or drink it with something else, food, I always get away with little to no gas. All right, if you're getting gas from it, you're probably still absorbing most of the calories. Again, you might be lactose intolerant, so you're not getting all the lactose, but you're going to get the fat, the protein. You're going to get some of the carbs from the lactose, but probably not all of them. So you're not going to get all of the calories. However, if you're getting diarrhea from it, you're losing a lot of things. You're going to be losing a lot of the calories if your lactose intolerance is so high that you're getting diarrhea, because you're not digesting food and you're expelling it undigested, unabsorbed, and you might even be losing nutrients in other foods that you were taking in. Now, I don't recommend this as a weight loss tactic, because what you need to remember is that liquid calories aren't always very filling, and if they're just passing through you quickly, your hunger isn't going to be helped a whole lot. And you're going to be losing a lot of essential nutrients, because that diarrhea could make you lose vitamins and minerals and other things that you need. And in fact, you could lose electrolytes from it. So if you're losing electrolytes from the diarrhea, just keep in mind that that is going to affect your training, your recovery, your energy, everything. So just keep in mind, if you're getting diarrhea from this, it is going to be harmful in the long term to your health, your training, and even weight loss, because again, you're not able to train as hard or be as active, and we're going to be more prone to muscle cramping and recovery issues from the diarrhea from it. So please don't think that I'm going to advocate drinking milk for lactose intolerant people as a weight loss method just because you don't absorb all of the calories from it. So just a little side tangent to cover there. All right, next question. Jason, why is it that so many vegans go out of their way to avoid vegetable oils? Are vegetable oils dangerous for health and only to be consumed in limited amounts? Thanks. You know, I could have just covered this topic with vegetable oils, but I will agree. Generally, refined vegetable oils are one of the two worst foods you can possibly eat in terms of health overall. So yeah, people who are avoiding vegetable oils and fried foods, cooked vegetable oils, along with processed sugars, that's probably the best thing you can do. What is really funny about it is you do see vegans avoiding it, and then they attribute their vegan diet oftentimes to being why some of them are better health. It's not the vegan thing. It's not the fact that they're avoiding animal products. It's the fact that a lot of them might be avoiding two of the worst things you could possibly eat. Some vegans choose to avoid refined vegetable oils and refined sugars. Well, if they do that, that's the healthiest thing in their diet. That was actually a much, much bigger thing for them than avoiding even the worst meats. Even the processed meats that everyone are worried about, we know that these other two things are going to be dramatically worse for you. So they're actually still cutting out the worst things in their diet, but then they'll attribute the fact that they might be healthy and fit and leaner due to the fact that they're avoiding animal products, and that's just not the case. But they are right on that. When you do see vegans and other people saying, yeah, you should avoid vegetable oil, there's a good reason to avoid those things. Refined vegetable oils, particularly once you've heated them and you cook with them, are one of the worst food sources you can eat for your health. And I think most experts out there agree on that one. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I did a bit of jogging in the past for my cardio, but it began to hurt my knees after a while, and now I just stick to walking, cycling, body weight circuits. I was just wondering what form of cardio you feel is most protective of the joints and ligaments in terms of long-term health. Thanks. All right, if you can't run without having these problems and the jarring issues and the other injuries associated with doing lots and lots of running, don't run or jog. There are lower impact forms of cardio out there for your knees, your joints, even avoiding stress fractures and things in your legs. Any sort of cycling, like a recumbent bike or swimming, are actually very, very good forms of cardio that you can do for long periods of time without damaging your knees, without having issues like that. So again, biking, cycling, whether it's indoor or outdoor, is a fantastic form of cardio that is much lower impact. And of course, swimming is probably one of the lowest impact forms of cardio you can do. So if you've got access to a pool and you like doing laps in a pool, that is a fantastic form of cardio, particularly for people who have any sort of knee, joint, and ligament problems that they're worried about exacerbating. Swimming might really be your way forward at that point, if you want to get all your cardiovascular capacity up and the benefits of cardio while letting your knees and the ligaments and tendons and everything in there heal. All right, next question. Hey Jason, my standing overhead press is not progressing nowhere near as fast as any other lift could. Could this be due to a lack of accessory work, or by the time I get to it I'm merely fatigued from all the other companion movements? Should I start doing it before I get to my bench press? Or is there any other accessory work that can help bring it up? Thanks. All right, a couple things. Probably going to be more fatigue. If it's later in your workout, you're going to be more fatigued on it. You're going to progress a little slower in some ways, or it's going to feel like you are. But the thing is that people miss on the overhead press. They're used to these big, heavy compound movements, and they're used to seeing 5 and 10 pound increments, and they find that they can't do that on the overhead press. Well, quite simply, your overhead press is probably less than half, if not a third or a fourth of what you do on, say, a squat or a deadlift. So accordingly, if a lift is only, you're using a third of the weight, technically in order to see a 5 pound improvement, that's the equivalent of a 15 pound improvement on the squat. You got to think in terms of percentages, not weight on the bar. It's actually quite a big deal to add 20 pounds to your overhead press. That is like the equivalent of adding 60 pounds to your squat on your work sets. So that's something that's going to take time, and it's a big deal, and you need to look at it in terms of percentages. And if you go back and look at what you've been doing over periods of time and you track it in percentages, you might realize that your really slow progression on the overhead press might be a 10% increase in performance, and you go compare that and see that you might have a 10% increase on your other big lifts also when you look at it from a percentage system. So you might not be progressing as slow on it as you actually think. And remember, the thing is with fatigue, if you always do the overhead press fatigued, the numbers that you're using are always going to be in a fatigue state. Those percentages are still going to go up accordingly. You're still going to get stronger. You're still going to get bigger based upon the increase in progressive overload. Irrespective of whether you're fatigued or not, as long as you're consistently fatigued, you can then track it accurately. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you've made a video before about how to get strong enough to do 20 chin-ups. That was called Greasing the Groove. And you said that you learn the movement while not fatigued. The body, therefore, you can then do the movement more properly with a higher weight, for example, and be able to progress in it better. Can this also be implemented for the bench press, squats, deadlifts? Yes, it can, but you need to be aware that these bigger, heavier movements are more fatiguing to your body in general. And I've demonstrated how to do this on the deadlift. I did a video on this in the past. It was called something like How to Deadlift Every Day Without Overtraining. And it was going and doing like 4 or 5 singles every day with only something like 80% of your 1 rep max, which normally you should be able to crank out somewhere between 6 to 8 reps with 80%. But in this case, you're just doing 1 rep, 1 clean rep, resting a minute or two, doing another, and just working into where you can do about 5 reps like that every day. And that will train the motor patterns for doing the deadlift. It will have an accumulative fatigue that will help you get bigger. It will help you get stronger, and it will train the motor pattern. So it's the same idea, but the thing is you need to very, very closely regulate these lifts, because keep in mind, I mean, again, you're doing singles with something you could probably do 6 to 8 reps with. That's a lot different than coming in and trying to go actually heavy on it. And it's the same thing with the greasing the groove method on the chin-ups. You don't ever go more than 50% of your max reps. So if you can do 10 chin-ups, you don't ever do more than 5 with this everyday, multiple time a day approach for greasing the groove to learn the pattern. And you'll still get bigger and stronger doing it, by the way. Guys need to realize that cumulative workload oftentimes is what builds a lot of muscle mass on you and puts size on you. It's not necessarily about, did I go to failure? Did I push it to the limit? Well, not always. If it was all about that instead of cumulative workload, no one would ever get bigger off of high volume training, which a lot of guys successfully utilize. I'm not the biggest fan of using high volume training, but it does work, and it works because there is that cumulative fatigue going on. That's not just about every set being taken to the absolute threshold. And the same thing needs to apply here when you're going to use these sort of extreme frequency methods. You can't go anywhere near maximum threshold. It's just about getting bigger through that cumulative fatigue and getting stronger by the motor unit learning. So you need to very much keep a ton in the tank, not just a little bit in the tank. It's about going nowhere near your limits so that you don't ever impact your recovery negatively from doing it at all. All right, next question. Is doing cardio still just as beneficial if it's done 5 minutes at a time, like when trying to do cardio while caring for an infant? Assuming the total time still adds up to 15 plus minutes in a day. Thanks. No, it is absolutely not the same. Most of your cardiovascular stuff has to do with the sustained capacity. And there's nothing to say that you can't go do multiple 30-minute sessions of low-intensity cardio every day and get the benefits. But if you're only doing 5 minutes of cardio here and there, it really isn't going to give you the cumulative effect because you never really tap into your endurance and work capacity while doing it. Generally, you really need to tap into that. So little short bursts of it are going to fall almost back towards the area of strength training. They're not going to actually improve your endurance. They're not going to improve your cardiovascular capacity if you're breaking it up into 5 minutes, no matter how many you do a day. You really, to get most of the benefits of cardio, you're going to need a minimum of something like 20 minutes at a time to really see the true benefits and see an improved cardiovascular capacity. And that is, again, only going to be very, very mild with 20 minutes here or there. And 5 minutes just is simply not going to cut it. You need to realize that cardio is not just about the cumulative fatigue. It's about the sustained fatigue and the sustained endurance that you're training and adapting to. And you're just not going to get that with short bursts spread out anywhere near the same extent. All right, next question. If one attempts to train with the purpose being health and longevity in addition to staying lean, would that be achievable without progressive overload and without adding additional strength? I plateau on several lifts because I do not want to increase my caloric intake, and my purpose is solely health, longevity, evading old age, debility, and staying lean. Thanks so much for the amazing informative channel. Yeah, no, I mean, if your goal is, let's say you're a healthy man and your goal is purely longevity and health, you don't need to progress on your list beyond a certain threshold. If you can probably do 225, 2 plates aside on your squats for reps, and you can do 3 plates aside for reps on your deadlift, if all you care about is longevity and health, that's going to give you everything that you possibly need. You don't need to get to 400 or 500 pounds on the deadlift. You don't have to get over 300 pounds on the squat, even though I consider those very easily achievable goals. You don't have to reach those numbers in order to see all the improvements in your metabolism, the reduced chances of cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, reducing osteoporosis, improving bone density, and again, especially being able to maintain those into your 70s, 80s, and 90s, that bone density. Yeah, you don't have to get that strong to see those. You can basically get to a decent strength level. You can get to just close to like my novice strength standards, not even fully reach those, and just stay there for the next 30 or 40 years, and you'll see all the health benefits and overall fitness benefits of strength training and resistance training. You don't have to get any stronger beyond that. Getting stronger beyond that is about putting on more size and having way more power than the average person. It's not necessarily going to help your longevity or your overall health in any way beyond that threshold. So it's just a matter of what your goals are. And for your goals, you could totally stop at 6 months of actual hard training. A good solid program gets us about as strong as you can get in 6 months, and just sustain that the rest of your life. And you'll get all those health benefits that you're looking for. And that's just reality, guys. All right, next question. Many people track macros to control their body composition. What about people that never track? They just eat by feel. Why don't we see more people doing that? Do you have any guidelines for someone who wants to get away from tracking but still keep their body composition in check? You know what? Millions of people do this. Most people don't track their macros. That's a very new fad. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It can absolutely work. It can lead to its own set of eating disorders and its own set of problems. But does it work? Yeah, if you know roughly how much carbs, fat, calories, things like that you eat a day, and you use that as a guide to control your body weight, it works very well. But remember, it's about controlling body weight. Really, that's just because you're controlling mainly the calorie. And counting the macros does very, very little. That's been way overhyped in terms of effect. It is the actual calories that give you 95+% of the results of counting macros. It's the fact that you're consistent with your caloric intake. That's literally 95%, if not 99% of the benefits of counting macros. And no one wants to admit that because they want to be so meticulous with it. It's just caloric control. However, as far as just keeping body composition in check, tons of competitive bodybuilders all through the 70s, 80s, and 90s never tracked their actual stuff. And they had no trouble winning Mr. Olympia contests. And that's the most extreme examples of body composition. And tons of people stay fit and healthy. Tons of top-level athletes around the world maintain fantastic body compositions without actually tracking anything other than just very, very loose tracking. Now, eating by feel shouldn't be instinctive eating to where you just eat whatever crap you want. But if someone, basically just eats mostly high satiety foods, they train hard, they do lots of cardio, they probably don't ever really need to track anything to eventually reach their goals. Again, it's one useful tool in the whole toolbox, but it isn't a necessary tool that has to be used to do so. And so when you say, why don't more people do it? Most people have done it that way all throughout the years of fitness. So again, the close tracking of macros is actually a very, very modern fad. And to be honest, I think people who don't obsess over this stuff on the internet probably don't do it as often as you think everyone does. Tons of people at your gym who are in great shape probably don't track their macros at all. So just throwing that out there. All right, next question. In my next meet, I will be competing in a fed that uses a deadlift bar. How much do you and other lifters get out of one in comparison to a stiff bar? Honestly, it depends on how much deficit work and hard work you do off the floor. I would say for me, when I grab a true deadlift bar, whippy bar versus a stiff bar, even at my own gym and training, I can probably squeeze about 10 pounds on a good day out of a deadlift bar. So if I could pull the week before, 495 for 5 reps, I could probably pull 500 or 505 for 5 reps with the deadlift bar if I come do that a week later, the next time I pull heavy. So for me, I get about 10 pounds. Some guys claim they get 20 or 25. Some guys claim they don't get any. So it really varies a lot according to who you ask. But for me personally, I feel like I can get about 10 more pounds off of the whippy bar if everything is perfect in a perfect environment. But I sometimes like to train with a stiff bar anyways, just to get a little more pop off the floor and force me to get a little tighter with my technique. But again, 10 pounds on a good day in a perfect environment is about what you can expect to get out of it. And just my personal experience and just going off of myself personally. All right, next question. Oh, I guess that's the end of the regular fitness questions. We'll get over to a more personal off-topic question. And this will be the last question of the week. Do you think that so long as medical advancements keep being made, the human life expectancy will just keep increasing until we have humans that live for 2,000 years and so on? Or do you think there's a limit to how long a human can live for even with new medical advancements? Well, there's always going to be a limit, but yeah, technologically we will probably reach, unless some major disaster or ideology takes over the world that is anti-science and pushes us back. Yeah, we can expect to see the capacity for human life expectancy to be increased, but you've got to factor in, and this is where things like capitalism and economics come into play, and it's the reason we have these things. Basically, people who have the most influence and the most value to society, and we oftentimes today base that upon their accumulation of wealth, and a different environment we might base it upon their intellect or their actual contribution to society to determine their value. But either way, it's going to be a value system. You simply can't have everyone live forever. And if you start using technology to increase life expectancy due to reduced resources, reduced space, but mainly resources, pollution, use of things that we need, the population growth would grow exponentially at that point. If you start adding even 50 or 100 years to human life expectancy, you're going to have to start putting a cap on population. Many would argue we need to do that already right now, but you start adding in technologies like that, and that's going to be an issue. That's very probably why we've seen such a massive boom in population anyways, between GMO crops giving us access to way more food so that we can actually feed more people and have billions more people than we used to be able to sustain 50 years ago. Modern medicine has increased life expectancy dramatically, particularly through childbearing years. Those are all factors in why our population has grown so high. You start adding another 100 years to life expectancy, we're going to have a major population problem. So at that point, you're going to start seeing eugenics come into play. That's the only choice we have at that point. And I know that's a dirty word. That's a scary word to a lot of people, particularly after the whole Nazi thing and their eugenics, which was pretty horrific. That was really what we see in a worst case scenario of what eugenics can do when it goes horribly wrong. But when you start talking about doubling human lifespan or tripling it, you're going to have eugenics in place to determine, hey, who do we need to allow to reproduce? Who do we want to give these technologies to allow to live to be 200 or 300 years old? Because you obviously don't need everyone to do it. And as much as people might want to say, hey, every person is valuable, they may not be valuable enough to society to allow them to live 300 years in a situation to where we don't have access to unlimited resources, unlimited space. You're probably going to see some eugenics involved of, well, who's the brightest, who's the smartest, who has the greatest contributions to society for them to be worthwhile for us to give this to. And eventually you're going to start seeing reproductive rights come into play of, hey, maybe you're going to need a minimum health or intellectual capacity set of genetics in order to be allowed to reproduce. And that's what the unfortunate downside of what you're probably going to see as technologies and medical advancements keep going to the point to where people can live longer and longer and longer. There is going to be, most likely, just for resource reasons alone, you're probably going to start seeing reproductive rights based upon your genetic fitness start coming into play, or basically eugenics, which again is a very scary term. But once you start talking about things like this, you don't really have a choice, because otherwise it's going to cause the extinction of the species due to resource depletion, or you're going to see a forced population bottleneck just occur naturally anyways due to environmental reasons. So you're going to have nature-induced eugenics anyway. So I don't know, it gets into a touchy thing, and the thing is, when you start thinking about the long-term effects of this, it starts creating all sorts of ethical dilemmas and ethical crises and problems and things that we're going to have to deal with in the future as medical technology and life extension improves. It's just some things to think about for you guys when you start talking about these topics, to realize all the different ethical directions they could spin into, because it can go in a dozen different directions at the drop of a hat. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.